want to be competitive, and if we want to be able to sell our products, we have to set up there in the U.S. I think the same thing should be done in Canada. I think we should develop an industrialization policy, a kind of Buy Canadian Act, to promote local development. As I was saying earlier, I think if we reduce the proportion of U.S. parts in the U.S., we can develop the expertise here when it comes to Canada. And that way we can be sure that the companies that we're working with can export to the U.S. And this way we can have integration with various types of vehicles. So that's all part of local transformation and processing. Thank you very much, Mr. Gervais. Now over to Mr. Massé, 6 minutes.
Thank you to the witnesses for being here. I'm going to continue with Mr. Gervais because it was along the line of questioning that I want to have, especially if we are thinking that, you know, we don't have enough of a domestic market to warrant investment to actually do the production here, but we're going to actually export primarily to the United States. Do you have an idea in terms of what percentage that would be? You know, I've been very lucky to have a committee here that's been very gracious over the last number of weeks as my border has been under siege here in Windsor, Ontario. And I can't tell you about the fallout that's still happening right now for that. And, you know, what's the point of actually trying to do some of this when we're utterly allowing our entry points to the United States to be destroyed right now? And so my concern is not just with regards to competing with the East and the West in terms of Europe and Asia, but also too is right now we're undermining our market access to the United States. So Mr. Gervais, sure, and then Mr. Billedeau after that, I'd like your comments on that, because I can tell you some people think that the border, you know, is open now. Well, it never really was actually closed during COVID. There was actually 5,000 vehicles a day, 4,000 trucks that were always crossing. The only time it was closed during COVID was the illegal blockades that took place. That's the only time the Ambassador Bridge actually shut its basically portal down. We are building new capacity, but now I have Democrats and Republicans that are on the warpath to get rid of any type of potential expansion investment in Canada. How do we deal with that? That's a very real thing that's taking place. So we have legislation with Build Back Better. Now we have a whole bunch of motivated congressional and Senate people that are after that too. I'm trying to get some redundancy in the system with a truck ferry. But what do you think about the current risk that's going on? Because, I mean, we can talk about this, but I mean, putting, you know, batteries and trying to ship them to Europe and to China is not really our primary market. It's going to be the United States. But right now, if we don't do anything significant to protect our borders, the decisions are being made. I can tell you that I'm on the phone with them every day. Mr. Gervais and Mr. Billedeau first, Mr. Gervais, and then Mr. Billedeau. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Mouse, you're totally right. I mean, obviously, I can't tell you the amount of percentage. I'm not too aware of the numbers, but I can tell you that yes, that the different borders are, the U.S. market is a big market, and then we're talking more about North America. When I was talking with New World Graphite, they were saying, for them, it's a North American market. It was the same thing when I had discussion with the Stromvolt. They're not looking to go in Europe, but it's the North American market. The market is huge, Canada, US. So there's a possibility to work there. But as time goes by, we see more and more protectionist of legislation that are being put in place. We had discussion in California where they wanted to have a Buy California Act, and they were like, "Hey, come on, you have to stop these things. I mean, we cannot have manufacturing plant all over every state." So there, for me, it's as a country, again, it's to fight on the percentage of parts that needs to be in the different vehicles, and then we have in our hand to make sure that we also apply some manufacturing, I would say, incentives for Canadian companies to place ourselves, to create a local demand, to develop our expertise, our innovation, to be more competitive. And I've always been talking about innovation. We are an innovative
I'm going
country.
to switch over to Mr. Billedeau because I've took up too much time, but I appreciate that and what you're doing. And also to Mr. Billedeau, we're known as the secondary market for a lot of European expansion. Those companies right now are now looking at Mexico instead of Canada because they're watching our border fail right now at this moment. The whole point of investing in Canada has also been its access to U.S. markets, which we're destroying at this moment. that's also an issue. People don't catch on to that, but that's the reality for European investment. I see it down here every day.
Well, thank you for the question. And I couldn't agree more that maintaining our economic competitiveness and access to the US market is vital for Canada's economic prosperity. And to that end, and perhaps unsurprisingly, the Chamber doesn't support protectionist measures between Canada and the US, our largest trading partner, as such policies could have significant unintended consequences. I think that with respect to critical minerals and Canada's strategy in this space, I mentioned during my opening remarks that we should explore some sort of stockpiling, strategic stockpiling, similar to the US's Strategic Petroleum Reserve, that can support Canada weathering any type of short-term supply disruption in this space. But more broadly, in order to ensure that collaboration between Canada and the US continues, we have to work on areas of agreement. We have a joint action plan on critical minerals signed between Canada and the US about 2 years ago. And it's the Chamber's view that Canada, under this agreement, has significant opportunities to be a major continental player on supplying minerals for clean tech, energy supply chain resiliency, and digital components vital for cybersecurity. We need to work with our allies in this space. And part of the calculus here is ensuring that vital trade corridors remain open and that there's trust amongst our closest trading partners.
Thank you, Mr. Massé. That's all the time we had. We'll go to Madame Gray for 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to all of the witnesses for being here today. My first questions are for Mr. Billedeau of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Billedeau, I wanted to go back to a statement put out by the Chamber in September of 2021, expressing concern that there hasn't been enough talk about how our national security depends on critical minerals, which I fully agree. Would you be able to expand on where you see the largest threats to our national security as a result of not having a plan around this?
Certainly, and thank you for the question. As I noted in my last comment, Canada indeed has this major opportunity to grow as a reliable partner in supplying critical minerals vital to North American development of clean tech, energy, supply chains, and digital components vital for cybersecurity. And in many of these areas, both Canada and the US currently source required critical minerals as well as finished products from China, which presents significant risks in the Chamber's view to our shared economic, security, and environmental priorities. So with that in mind, it's the Chamber's view that we need to work with our North American partners to accelerate collaboration under the Joint Action Plan on Critical Minerals and explore the use of incentives and regulatory measures to support the extraction, processing, stockpiling, and export of critical minerals that Canada has an abundance of.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Billedeau, has the Chamber been consulted on any strategy being developed by the federal government, and have you received any indication on when a strategy might be completed?
I don't have any knowledge of the timeline for the Government of Canada's critical minerals strategy. I can note that we are engaged with members of NRCan on an ongoing basis, but the level of consultation specific to a critical mineral strategy, I'm not aware of at this time.
Okay. What can the federal government do to improve engagement with stakeholders on the critical minerals file, do you believe?
Well, I think that's an important question. I think there's two components to the answer. One, there has to be ongoing consultation. And two, there has to be ongoing consultation with a number of different stakeholders along the supply chain, inclusive of indigenous stakeholders. Critical minerals, our strategy for critical minerals should not just be exploration and extraction. It should be engaging with stakeholders along the value chain, including those intermediary processes and manufacturing processes to determine potential opportunities and touch points where the Government of Canada can provide value and support.
Great, thank you. So just that I'm really clear, there's not direct consultation from the department or from the minister reaching out to organizations like yourself that you're aware of?
I am not aware of the Canadian Chamber participating in any consultation on a strategic plan for critical minerals at this time.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. So while we're waiting for this strategy being developed by the government, what is Canada and its members that you represent at the Chamber losing out on by not having a strategy in place?
Well, perhaps to answer that question, I'll quickly articulate the opportunities across Canada in this space. Each region of our country has reserves of different critical minerals that can support regional sustainable economic development. Saskatchewan has abundant reserves of potash and uranium. Quebec has notable lithium, vanadium, and a number of other minerals. There's rare earth elements in the Northwest Territories and uranium and manganese in Nunavut. We have mines on the East Coast and smelters on the West Coast. So unlocking cohesive development of critical mineral supply chain from extraction to manufacturing and closed loop recycling presents opportunities to all of Canada. And this is a space that the private sector is particularly looking for government leadership on in the years ahead.
Great, thank you. Just one last quick question here. Is there any redundancy or unnecessary regulations which are impeding the ability for the sector to grow, in your opinion?
I don't have anything specific to point to at this time. I would note that our engagement with natural resources companies on this topic is relatively new. We just kicked off our Critical Minerals Council earlier this month. So I can commit to following up as we do continue to engage with stakeholders.
If you could table that information to this committee, sorry to interrupt you, I'm out of time here, but if you could table that, that would be much appreciated.